Hi, my name is Catherine. I'm 20 years old. Tell me, what was the most memorable moment in your life? Maybe riding a roller coaster? Or buying a puppy? Mine took place last summer, and it was not fun at all. I almost went to jail for life. How about that? Yes, it really happened. Do you want to know my story? Then make yourself comfortable, and I'll begin. It all began when I finished my second year of college and decided to go abroad in the summer. I didn't have a lot of money and chose to go to Thailand. I'd watched a lot of movies and commercials about Thailand, and it seemed cool enough. I bought plane tickets, booked a hotel, and paid for several guided tours. On the day of the flight, I boarded the Boeing and we went to Thailand. The flight was long and I decided to take a nap. Suddenly, I saw another passenger next to me who clearly wanted to chat. He was a grown man with a repulsive appearance. I immediately found him unpleasant and wished I hadn't sat next to him. He said his name was Freddie and that he went to Thailand every summer. Freddie began to ask me what hotel I was going to stay at and how I was planning to spend my time. I made it clear I didn't want to talk to him, but Freddie didn't seem to get it. Fortunately, after half an hour, he grew tired of the conversation and, as it seemed to me, fell asleep. Finally, I got immersed in a book and the rest of the flight went quietly. That's how I got to Thailand. It was so cool. Much cooler than the videos I'd watched. The hotel was incredible. And the beach. I'd never seen such beautiful places. I walked along the streets, lay on the beach, and took photos of various sights. However, sometimes I would accidentally meet that nasty Freddie with whom I'd flown on the plane. Sometimes he'd be in my hotel. Sometimes we'd run into each other in a restaurant. It was like he was watching me. Of course, it was all just my vivid imagination, so I relaxed and just stopped paying attention to him. My vacation was flying by like that, until one day, I met him. One day, a tanned guy sat down next to me on the beach and offered to buy me a cocktail. His name was Pano, and he was a real looker. We spent the evening drinking cocktails and chatting. He was a lot of fun. Pano knew the language very well because he worked as a translator. When it grew dark, Pano walked me to my hotel, and we agreed to meet the next day. He was so sweet that I kissed him goodbye. Already in my room, I thought, well, why not? Why not have a small holiday romance? Palm trees and the sea were all very nice, but I was getting tired of visiting ancient monuments. And Pano was clever, young, and very handsome. I made up my mind. I began to meet with Pano every day. We walked, swam, and went to restaurants together. Pano became my boyfriend. I think I'm in love with him. He just put a spell on me. I realized with sorrow that my vacation was coming to an end, and I would soon have to return to my homeland, and Pano would stay here. We agreed that we would definitely see each other again. My last day in Thailand was very sad. I didn't want to leave, but there was nothing I could do. I had to go home. I packed my suitcase and said goodbye to Pano. He didn't go to the airport to see me off. He said he didn't like long goodbyes. We exchanged phone numbers and agreed to stay in touch. When I arrived at the airport, I met the nasty Freddie again. He saw me and waved. Oh no! There was no way we were going to be on the same plane again. If he sat next to me once more, I'd go nuts. To avoid meeting Freddie, I hurried to go through customs. But then, something unexpected happened. When the customs officers began to scan my things, something in my suitcase caught their attention. They asked me to open it and show them the contents. It was so strange. What could have surprised them like this? But when I opened my suitcase, I found a large package inside that I hadn't put there. What was it? The customs officers opened the package and there was money in it. A lot of money. How did this end up in my suitcase? I was confused. A control service officer took one of the banknotes and held it up to the light. His face immediately turned serious, and he said something into his radio. At once, the police appeared and grabbed me. What was going on? Let me go. It's not mine. I don't know where the money came from. But they didn't listen to me. They took me to the back room. As I was leaving, I saw the anxious faces of other passengers who were staring at me in fear. I noticed Freddie among them. He was standing and smiling for some reason. I was put behind bars in a private cell. I sat there for about an hour. My plane had already left, of course. I couldn't understand what had happened. How had the package gotten to my suitcase? I packed it myself. But what I was even more worried about was what would happen to me next. Soon, a police officer came to my cell and took me to an interrogation room. An officer who knew the language fairly well spoke to me there. He explained that things were looking very bad for me. The money that had been found in my suitcase turned out to be counterfeit. Thanks to Thailand's laws, I would get a really long sentence for it. I was so terrified of what was going on that I started to cry. I couldn't believe that this was happening to me. I tried to convince the officer that the money wasn't mine. I didn't even know how it could have gotten into my suitcase. But the officer didn't want to listen to anything. He gave me some papers to sign and said my lawyer would be coming soon. And then I was back behind bars. That was all. I was sitting there crying. I thought my life was over. I would never go back home. Would I end up in a filthy prison? Thailand no longer seemed like such a paradise to me. I began to wish I hadn't come here at all. Oh, if only I could turn back time. Suddenly, I heard a rustle near my cell. I looked up and saw a man's shadow quietly moving down the hall. Who could it be? The man stopped by my cell and stepped into the light. It was Freddy. But what was he doing here? Freddy had stayed to help me. He knew the laws of Thailand very well, and I was looking at a very severe punishment for smuggling. The only thing I could do was run. Freddy showed me the keys that he'd stolen. He quickly opened the cell door and said, "Get out of the airport unnoticed and find someone to help you." I don't know why, but I listened to Freddy. I quietly slipped out of the cell and headed for the exit. Luckily, there were no guards on the way. I left the airport and ran for the city. I kept wondering, what had happened? The money in my suitcase? The prison? My sudden escape? Freddy? Who was that Freddy guy, really? I knew absolutely nothing about him. Had he truly been following me? Or maybe he was the one who'd put the money in my suitcase. Exactly! After all, he had been on the plane with me. He must have wanted to smuggle the counterfeit money in my suitcase. That's why he'd come back, to take it away. Could he still be watching me? I felt scared, but who could help me? And then I remembered Pano. That's who was going to save me. I asked a passerby for a phone and called him. Fortunately, I had already memorized his number by heart. He'd found out what had happened to me, told me to come to him at once, and gave me his address. Oh, I was so happy. I was saved. I followed the address and was surprised to find myself in a dirty and gloomy area. Did Pano, my translator boyfriend, truly live here? I found his house and knocked on the door. He opened it very quickly and let me in. I couldn't keep standing any longer and fell into an armchair. I began to say how glad I was that Pano had helped me, but for some reason, he wasn't paying any attention to me. Then he turned to me and asked angrily,
"What'd you tell them?"
Pano didn't look kind at all right now. What was going on? Pano grabbed me and began to shake me.
"Have you told them about me? Answer me."
Pano, let go of me! You're hurting me! But he only kept shaking me harder and shouting.
"Where is the money? Where did you leave it?"
That's when I understood everything. It had all been him. Pano had taken advantage of me. Terrified, I pushed him away, but Pano began to walk towards me. I screamed, and suddenly the door of the house was blown out. Several police officers immediately ran into the room and grabbed Pano. I didn't know what was going on. When it was over, Freddy came up to me and gave me his hand. At the police station where Pano had been taken, Freddy told me that his name was actually Fred Sullivan, and that he was a special undercover agent. He investigated cases of smuggling and fought organized crime. He realized that I would be contacted by smugglers to transfer something forbidden in my suitcase across the border back into the plane. I was indignant. Why'd you use me as bait? Freddy apologized and said that it was the only way to track down where the shop for the production of counterfeit money was hidden, and I had helped them. Thanks to me, they'd caught Pano, the leader of a group of smugglers. He was a very dangerous criminal. I was scared. I'd spent a whole week in his company. But Freddy calmed me down. He said that he'd been watching the entire time and that he would not have let anything happen to me. And, well, that's my whole story. I was so glad that I hadn't gone to jail. I hadn't done anything wrong after all. I did do one stupid thing, though. I fell in love with a criminal. Well, by now I've already been punished for that mistake. I went back home to my studies, and I tried to forget about it all as quickly as possible. After a while, I succeeded. But suddenly, one day, I got a letter in my mail. It was from a Thai prison. It read,
"Don't think that you've escaped from me. I'll see you soon enough." Thank you for leaving me your address. Yours, Pano.
As soon as I read those lines, the fear came back to me. Would this never end? I immediately dialed the number from the business card Freddie had left me, but another man picked up and said that he'd be handling my case from then on. Freddie had been transferred to another department after the successful case in Thailand. I told the agent about the letter and Pano's threats, but he just assured me that Pano was in prison for a long time and that he couldn't do anything to me. All he had left to do was write those letters, which I should really just throw away. But I'm still worried that he might have accomplices, or that he might try to escape. Maybe I should leave and change my name. Please, tell me, what should I do now? Subscribe to the channel, and please, share this video. Let my story become a cautionary tale for everyone.